one of the reasons they've said that the connection with land is weak in terms of a capital formula, and that the major reason was, aside from 10 boards formally allegedly resolving in its favour, is that that provided consistency with the LDI proposal, except of course that's not correct. We've got two formulas for local boards: the Auckland Transport CapEx proposal, which is 100% population based, with the 1% for Great Barrier Island and the 2% for Waiheke. So that's where the 1% and 2% precedent was set. So it's 100% plus 2%, 1%. The LDI formula isn't 1% and 2%, so staff are recommending something that actually isn't consistent with either of the two existing formulas. That's the 2.3 and the 2.7% for Waiheke and Great Barrier, with 95 and 5%. The land is in the OPEX one. So the officer's recommendation for you doesn't introduce consistency. It's a hybrid between the two formulas. And so my board, along with several others, and if what Kay has presented in terms of if boards were able to reflect, then a majority position, it would actually be 16 boards would not support land. The reason for that is the 2.3 and the 2.7, we're just going to remember for the Gulf Islands, was actually just ring fencing existing expenditure. So there's no formula based or policy basis for that. It was ring fencing under an OPEX situation. I believe there is actual consensus among boards for the 1%, 2% when boards are reflected, even though the resolutions don't strictly say that after the boards have reflected on it. The difficulty we have is some boards, of course, took a position of looked at it from their perspective, and others looked at trying to find a fair formula for the region. So some have done the more helicopter view, and that's why it's all over the paddock. And so that's why some boards, on reflection, now they've had the opportunity to hear what the thinking of other boards, have endeavoured to move to a position that everyone can live with. So if the 95% population, which must be the main driver, there is a recognition from most that deprivation needs to count in CapEx. The reason for that being it's not the same as OPEX. OPEX, we need to deliver services in the land areas, in the widespread areas and the deprivation areas on a wider basis. So that costs more to deliver the same sort of level of service and programs. CapEx, everyone's got a toilet story. I could share my toilet story with you, but I'm not sure it helps advance. We've all got toilets that need replacing, whether they're in Oriri Point or, Salisbury Reserve. And all local boards rely on the same funding base to renew or upgrade their facilities. My board, don't want to overemphasize because I'm here on a representative basis, we are host to the region. Our toilets are used by people who don't live in Waitemata, I would suggest, as much or more than Franklin's. So I'm not sure that takes us very far. The issue is land an appropriate basis for CapEx expenditure? That's what it comes down to. Is deprivation an appropriate weighting for this, or should it be 100% population based? I believe that there's a majority, certainly a consensus on deprivation should be included, other than the two boards that are pretty firm on 100% population, and that's a recognition of an historic under expenditure in most of the areas of deprivation. I think we recognised, it's the east versus the west. We've heard it from Kaipātiki versus Takapuna, Devonport over the years that I've come to this governing body, listening to other boards speak. So I think there's a recognition of that. Land, there is an element of deprivation in land as well. There is a slight element of double counting. There's some areas of furthest parts of Auckland, there is an element of deprivation in those areas. I know Oriri, for example, I know that well. Those that aren't the batch owners, the residents there, that would be considered an area of deprivation. So, that's not the determinant. So it really comes down to what does land value, other than, we need to do up our Oriri toilets story, actually deliver for Auckland. The distortion factor of the land weighting is self-evident. I don't want to pick on Franklin, but I will. I mean, we're talking 446 under the new formula, the 95, 5, 1%, 2%. You know, that's more than several other boards under the same weighting who don't have the land weighting. You know, at Devonport Takapuna's got nearly 50,000 less. And, you know, in Upper Harbour, again, slightly more. So it's not a matter of we can't do things. The issue is, should Franklin get 100,000 more as a result of a land weighting to do God's work that I'm sure they do in their area, which we all want to do in our own areas. The issue is, what's the point? What is the relevance of a land weighting? Staff have said it's marginal. It's currently based on the LDI formula, where that's a different operational delivery of services. We've all got toilets, we've all got pathways to upgrade, and weighting must be population mostly, but what does land deliver other than a disproportionate amount of money to the rural areas?
I'm going to bite my tongue just at the moment. Ross. Councillor Clow.
Yeah, I have a question for the staff. Is Andrew and...
Andrew and Beth, would you like to? Thank you. Thank you, local board chairs.
We have questions later.
From your
Donations, Andy.
silly.
And it may be a question Sue may want to answer. I mean, last year when we discussed the LDI OPEX funding, Councillor Casey and myself were quite adamant that land should be dropped out of it, and I will say in the final report that came from the finance team led by Andrew and Matthew, at that time said the staff on reflection thought that land geography should be dropped from the formula. That was the recommendation in the final report. Okay, Councillor Casey and myself, we're probably trying to bite off a little bit more than we could chew, in that we went, I think, 85 population and 15 deprivation, and of course that didn't win. But we still stuck with the 95.5, even though the staff had said, really, it's just got no logic, and I must admit I'd been quite adamant that statistically it distorts things. Andrew, how come, you know, even in this report in clause 23, the report says exactly the same thing, the majority of boards don't want it, and yet we've come through with recommendations that actually say stick to 95.5. Don't we, yeah, I don't want to put you on the spot too much because, yeah.
So staff's position on land area was based on the fact that there isn't a statistical connection we can definitively draw, and we're much more confident about deprivation and population. It doesn't mean to say that there might not be if we expended a great deal of resource to discover a connection. It wasn't worth that energy to do it. We've maintained the consistency with our earlier advice by noting that comment in paragraph 23. However, we've got a broad formula for allocating across the 19 boards for LDI, and the view amongst staff was, after debating the issue, that it was appropriate to recommend the same thing for CapEx.
Benny?
Okay, well, just want to mention that Councillor Casey and myself have put up an amendment which is based on 95.5. We did think about 90.10, but to be quite honest, we just want to achieve by knocking out geography, and therefore we're happy to be in the middle there at 95.5. So there is an amendment up there ourselves. Thank you.
If I may, the $10 million came from the decision making in May for the long-term plan, and it'll be really good. I know there are some different views amongst the local boards. It's not an easy decision for you to make when there are a number of different requests coming to you for how we do that, but I believe there is merit in making a decision and allowing the boards to proceed in spending the money that they'll be provided with. And all of them, of course, for most of them, this will be new money they wouldn't have had previously. So there's value in making a decision, even if it's not possible to completely please everyone.
Yep.
Thank you. Well, I'm going to move the recommendation so we can discuss it. Have I got a seconder?
Sorry, the recommendation
you.
or the amendment?
No, the recommendation that's on the board.
I'll second that.
Councillor Cashmore is going to second it.
So just point
Mem-
of order, I thought Member Clow just moved a motion, and that's the primary motion.
That's
He
the
moved an amendment.
No, seconded it.
Yep, but he moved it as an amendment, so we can move the substantial, I will take the amendment when it comes to voting, but we'll have the discussion first.
It's quite correct, it is an amendment because we support, sorry, A 1 and 2.
Yeah, oh, okay.
And there would have to be a consequential to B if our amendment passed.
Yeah.
Yeah, I've got the mayor next.
It's just a question of Andrew.
Are the mayors on the speaking list?
Yep, look, Madam Chair, I'll just jump straight into this one. Councillors and local board chairs, great to see you here and batting your end. And Chair Shale, you're absolutely right, and so is Chair Kay. Look, we could always have more time. And I was sorely tempted at the front end of this discussion to say, unless we actually get total consensus, don't come back to us. You know, we really need to see the boards with total consensus, but it's evident that that's not going to happen, and that didn't really happen either with the operational budget. So, councillors, the first point I'll make is that we all agree with Waiheke and with Great Barrier.
Yep.
Well, if we agree with Waiheke and Great Barrier, why wouldn't we agree with the recommendation? The only reason we agree with Waiheke and Great Barrier is because they have got a land issue. They have got deprivation, they've got population deficit, but they have primarily got a land issue. It doesn't stack up. So for the first point, if we agree, and this is where we ended up with ops. If we ended up with ops where we said, look, there is a land issue, then why wouldn't we be in exactly the same situation with this budget around capital? So what Andy has asked us to do is put our hats on, which is as regional governors. On this issue, we have got to pretend we don't represent our community, but we represent all of Auckland. And this is why my leadership role in this is critical. Because I am representing the whole community, and I don't have a beef with anyone. And, you know, I'd hope that the local boards have been able to come back to us and say, look, we've got a united position, we're all given some on this. And the giving some is actually around the issue of geography. And so as a representative of the whole of Auckland, I actually, you know, I'm going to be consistent through all of the debates that I've been at for the last 24 years. And the first debate that I had really in Manukau was about whether or not we would recognise a special case of Clevedon. Clevedon had a de minimis population, but they had huge, 2/3 of the whole of the community was rural. And so, unless we actually recognised them and gave them some sort of, you know, appropriate community representation, democratic representation, then they wouldn't get their concerns dealt with. And we've done the same on the operational budget with the 2 rural wards in particular. And yes, is it unfair if you're to look at it from a population viewpoint? You bet it is. But goodness gracious, how many times have we been out around Rodney and Franklin in particular and had a look at the challenges those poor guys face, and particularly Rodney. It's tough, and Waitakere the same. To a lesser degree, but not a lot of difference, quite frankly. So it is they have got villages for Africa. And each of those villages have expectations. I was up at Warkworth the other day, and Warkworth would like to see public transport there and exactly the same as it happens in Epsom. You know, now, are there expectations beyond the pale? Of course they are. But the point they're making is, look, we're part of the whole super city now, and don't leave us behind. And the challenge that we've got, and we're not talking big numbers here in the end, the challenges that they have got are significantly greater purely because of the size of the wards. So you've got to listen to the plea from Andy and Brenda. The plea is a reasonable plea. And you know, I suspect around the table here, the sentiments would be for a population and deprivation scale, and I can completely understand that. But if we are to look at this as a whole of a super city discussion and apply a fairness quotient to it, given the challenges of the rural wards in particular, now, I'm not saying the deprivation challenges aren't as equally challenging.
Yes, you are.
No, I'm not. I actually led a deprivation challenge for 12 years. And in the end, to be fair, we were coming off the base. Someone or other made a comment that in various parts of the community we weren't able to address it. We did in the south. We absolutely addressed the issues of deprivation. And Councillor Quacks and I argued high and low, him for Howaka, me for Otara, through those issues to try and actually get reasonable and fair spend across the whole of a community where you had deprivations issues as against non-deprivation. But what I'm talking about here is fairness across the whole of a region. And the issue that I think is one that overrides and actually should give us some pause for thought and consideration, and what we did with the ops budget in addressing that is the issue of fairness around geographic challenges, and they are massive. Now, we're not going to address it all in this, but what we do is we give some indication. So, look, councillors, you know, I know we're split on this, and quite frankly, my first sentiment and instinct was to say, look, we need to be in total agreement on this issue, as the boards do. And so just keep sending it back to them until they agree. But you know, if the sentiment is, look, make a blinking decision so they can get on with it, then I support that too. And I'd just encourage us to make a decision that is in the overall context of things fairer for all. And you know, I encourage you to back the overarching recommendation on the basis that on all balance, it's about as fair as we could get given what we're trying to govern here.
Thank you. Councillor Lee.
I sympathise with the Mayor on this one, and he's quite right, actually. He's the only person here who represents the whole region. And so, unlike all the rest of us, we have local wards to go out to bat for, and that's our job. But we do also have the dual role of taking a regional position. This is, after all, this super city does have the responsibilities of a regional council. In terms of the question of land area and deprivation, on the face of it, land area is objective and absolutely measurable. Deprivation, on the face of it, seems more subjective and more difficult to scientifically measure. I wonder about the issue also of remoteness. I am in the fortunate position of representing the most intensely occupied part of Auckland, Waitemata Ward, or Central Auckland, including the CBD, and also the most remote part, and that probably would be Little Mahuki Island, occupied by Mrs. Faye Ngāwaka. And I have to ensure, taking a regional position, that everyone in my ward also gets a fair shake. And so that is not so easy. But I would make the point that it's not just a matter of land area, but a matter of remoteness that probably relates to deprivation. It's not easy, and it will be always a compromise, and I guess this is not the end point. If more data comes in, then we will need to refine this as we go on, as the Auckland Council progresses. Thank you.
Thank you. Kathy?
I had a couple of questions, if that's all
Okay,
right.
so, yep.
Andrew, I was listening carefully to your answer to my colleague, Councillor Clo's question. Can I ask it again, because I didn't quite understand your answer? And that is why you said in the report, and I quote, "Staff note there is also a case for excluding land area, given it doesn't have a strong connection to demand for services and shifts significant funding to rural areas." That, combined with the fact that 11 of the boards said no to land, which is probably, according to Kay, now up to 15. So why have you chosen a minority position to put to this council? I just need to understand that. And I was listening carefully, just didn't get it. And I'll also ask you the question, the second question, because it's actually part of the first question. It was a question Sheila asked, and that was, what does land value deliver to Auckland?
So on the first question, we can comfortably say as staff that there's an objective connection between population and property deprivation and a demand for services. Can't as comfortably say that for land area, and therefore we've said as such both in this report and our report on the OPEX allocations. However, doesn't mean to say that there isn't a connection. We just can't say that objectively there is one based on statistical research. The councillors, you as councillors can make a decision based on the advice you've got from us, looking at how the money shifts around under different options as to what you think is fair. Certainly you've done that for the OPEX allocation. Staff have therefore mirrored that back to you in our advice, and that's not just me, that's the staff sitting around, the senior staff sitting around together, my colleagues in local board services and accounting, etc., coming back to you with that. So, not a strong objective connection, but reflecting the balance of views that you yourselves had made about assessing that fairness, which a challenge you have in front of you again today. Your last question, you were asking about the value. What was it? What value does land area give to the city? I'm not sure. It depends on what dimension of value you were referring to. Not a question I'd answer. I want to answer off the cuff, and I'm not.
A supplementary question. What weight did you give to the boards? The 11 who initially said no to land, and probably now there's up to 15 saying no to land. So,
not staff's role to give weight to particular the views of boards or councillors, but rather to provide some objective advice so that you may then assess that alongside the views that have been provided to you by the boards to help you make a decision.
Yeah, I like this, Rose.
Good on you, Andrew.
Well done, Andrew. Thank you. Callum? Oh, sorry, Councillor Penrose.
Yeah, thank you, Madam Chair, and this reminds me of the LTP process and signing off the LTP. And I just can't, for the life of me, thinking that we've just got over that one hurdle and we've struck another one. And I know that the government were deeply concerned in that process, and if we hadn't signed off the LTP, how much of a slap in the face it would be for them, but more in particular, the consequences for New Zealand. And we talk about a united Auckland 5 years on, and we have these challenges before us, and we're talking about a few $100,000. And in the first term, I can recall we spent, well, we gave $3 million to the organ and Parnell, yet we're putting the boards at loggerheads with each other. I think that's quite sad. I think that's quite sad. But overall, I can recall prior to the LTP, 12 months prior to the LTP, when a number of us were lobbied, and the mayor was then told he was being unrealistic, irresponsible, at holding the rates at 2.5. It needs to be 3.5, and deliver something back to Auckland. And a number of us lobbied the mayor on that, only to be left red-faced by some that lobbied us and said, no, we didn't say that.
Exactly.
And now we're in this position. And I hear where Andy's coming from, and I hear where Penny's coming from. And those at the far ends of both the region. And none of us, well, a lot of us around this table didn't want one region. A lot of us fought hard to stay our own little borough councils. But we're here, and we've got to come together. And sometimes we're going to have to bite the bullet. And yes, we're talking $11,000 and maybe up to $33,000. But I also hear the $223,000 and I hear the $120,000. But Andrew has mentioned that this is new money that the boards wouldn't have had anyway. Is that correct? Did I hear correct on that?
Yep.
Yes, so everyone's better off to a certain extent. It just depends, well,
How you look at it?
there was some slips money previously.
Right.
But,
Didn't have that.
Right.
so it's an improvement in most dimensions. It's just how that's shared out. Not an easy decision, but some value in making a choice today so they can proceed.
Right. But I know that I don't just stay in Papakura. I travel. I know I spend a lot of time in Franklin, and I know I spend time up from time to time in Rodney and out west periodically. And I know a lot of people travel to this region. And we've heard those stories from Shale, from Andy, and from Kay. But it's a damn difficult one, people. But there again, what's more in particular, what to me more the concern is that we are elected to represent the region. I know we come from our wards, and it's difficult because we're leading up to an election, and by crikey, I bet you, a lot of us around this table are going to get slam dunked. Always easy to throw mud. Say no. It's a damn sight harder to say yes. But we've got some big decisions to make between now and October next year. And my way of thinking is that we've got to bring the other skirts of Auckland together, whether you're in Tihana or whether you're in Belmont and Pukekohe. So I sympathise with everybody, but we've got to make these hard calls. In the call today, I'll be supporting these recommendations.
Thank you. Councillor Cooper.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I guess the rural local boards will never win in a vote at the local board chairs meeting because there's only 3 of them. So if their other boards can't support them, we have to as councillors, just because we are regional now. And I guess it's, I'm between a rock and a hard place if I was trying to please both of my local boards because one's urban and one's rural. So, hey. But what I look at is the fact that in Auckland City the edges got left out, and here we are again at risk of the edges getting left out, and we can't really do that. From, if you look at deprivation, Helensville is probably one of the most deprived little townships. Glen Eden is another deprived area, and it's also a transport hub. It's where a lot of people travel to work from, and that local board's been struggling and actually has been put on hold since the previous amalgamation in 1989, waiting to do projects and saving up its money. And it's great that it's got this money, but getting an extra whatever it is, 13,000, it's not a lot, 17,000 will make a difference in their partnerships with Auckland Transport. It'll help their deprivation as well because more people will be able to access jobs, at the park and ride. I think if you look from Muriwai in the north, Matakana, right down to Kariatahi in the southeast, Awhitu in the southwest, that's our playground where the bulk of us live. That's our playground. People in their scores in their Remuera tractors go up to Matakana, use all the facilities. They do pay rates up there too because a lot of them live up there in the holidays. But we all use these playgrounds and we all expect a high standard of amenity. We start to want urban amenity in our rural areas, and so that puts pressure on those local boards to provide that. And we can't say, oh, well, not enough of you live there, so we're not giving you any money either. So this is a balance. It's only 5%. 90% still goes to population. And that's one of the reasons I feel that, we need to put land in here. It does make a difference. We're all using those places a lot. we all want to preserve the ruralness of it, but we do want a bit of urban amenity when we're up there enjoying our